We'll let everybody get in. So happy to see you all. Good morning. Shining faces. Okay, let's meditate. Sorry for the wet hair. So happy to be here with you. So let's take our attention inside. Our favorite thing to do. And allowing your attention to settle below your belly button. Just feel it settling. I've been doing K2 mantras lately, and it's been K2 is headless. So I've been imagining myself as headless without a rational mind and experiencing what that feels like to let go of the rational mind. K2's deity is Ganesh. So you can also visualize replacing your own head with an elephant's head. And elephants are probably the most refined animals that we know of on the planet. It would seem they live from love. holding to this very refined space. Gently begin to open your eyes. How is everybody? So happy to be here this morning. So it's very interesting to let go of the rational mind, to even try to let go of the rational mind, because our culture values the rational mind more than anything, except money. But just letting that constant monologue drift off into some other plane is interesting. And you know, the imagination in replacing the head with an elephant head, suddenly it was all heart. Yes.
Good morning. Nice to see you all. I noticed with that meditation, like my hands really opened up. And then a minute or so later, the top of my legs are like like just below trunk of my body, both my legs opened up at the top and the energy was moving there. So I just wanted to share that. That was kind of significant for me. Very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, I think it's important that our meditation not get static
Mhm.
and, you know, be the same old thing because everything about life is dynamic and it's not about, you know, repeating an experience. I mean, there isn't even really a goal to it. It's just whatever life is ready to reveal in this moment, to be open to that. And for some reason, right now, it feels like the veil between life and death is thinner than usual. maybe it's because there's so much chaos in our environment. It's hard to know. And the planets are sort of bunching up. They aren't spread out. And when the planets get bunched up like that, the worldly experience gets concentrated in certain areas, which are different for each of us, because depending on where, excuse me, where our ascendant is in the chart, the role of the different planets in houses will change. So there, 12 possible ascendants, and whichever one we have determines which area is turned on at a given time. And very often when the planets are bunched up, it's not the house that has so many planets in it that's impacted, but the house that it's looking at, because it's aspects. That's when planets are looking at each other. The aspects are very powerful that the glance of the planet throws. So I have something interesting happening in my own chart right now. Pluto has come within 1 degree of my Rahu and will be in contact with my Rahu until March of 2027. And whenever Pluto goes over a natal planet, everything that planet impacts will change dramatically in that time period. And Rahu, being an outcast and completely focused on material manifestation, who knows what will happen in the next, it's a year and a half. And one of the things that happens when Rahu is turned on like that is that, of course, Ketu, the planet of spirituality and enlightenment, also gets turned on. And since Ketu is the most likely planet to be able to tame Rahu, this is why we're doing Ganesh mantras. Because Ganesh is the deity of Ketu. So that's the personal update. And I have to say, it's gratifying to see that the more extreme the president gets, the more profound the backlash we're seeing. And that's really wonderful. And hats off to Minnesota for fighting back. Oh, that's great. I had read that, Brenda. Thank you. She just posted that the Black Panthers are fully invigorated and operating in Philadelphia. And given that tomorrow's Martin Luther King Day and civil rights for all of us are on the table. It does feel like everything's about to turn, though, like we're turning the ship. It's very hard to get it righted, but it's happening. And holding to love just becomes more and more important. We were thinking about anger the other day and how anger actually hurts the person who feels it the most. This is why anger is not the most intelligent choice that we can hold. So I was having a discussion with a person I know about anger, and someone had just she's a masseuse, and someone had just left a review that was really terrible, that said that her towel was too small that she provided. And it's a very large towel. It must have been an enormous person. And uh, that he didn't feel adequately covered. And she said she allowed herself to be angry for 3 hours, but that's her limit. 3 hour time limit, then she's done. I thought, wow, that's discipline.
One would have thought he might have spoken up.
Exactly. I mean, that's what you do in that situation.
Yeah,
You ask for two towels, or you say this isn't enough.
right. Please.
Yes. But it was pretty funny because she was telling me at a moment that the towel was from my neck to my toes. I mean, it was a big towel. She said I had the same towel on him. So we had a good laugh. But she was laughing, she was telling me the story and laughing, which really shows that she did dump her anger after 3 hours. So that seems like a good rule. Hard to implement, though. My experience with anger is it kind of cycles through and then it cycles through again, and gradually dissipates. But it may be that if you call it in all its intensity and allow yourself to really be the anger and then just consciously let it go, I think that may be what she was talking about. So it's important for us to also have some vision of the world that we want to occupy, the priorities of the world that we choose for ourselves, because we can, in learning to release anger, we can choose love, and we can envision a world based in love, peace, and cultivating the abundance that's available to be shared by everyone. The only value in what we're seeing is to learn from it to choose differently for ourselves. And in choosing differently for ourselves, we're providing an example for everybody else. And in holding to those choices as we live our lives, we are creating our own reality. Another person I know quite well has a job in corporate America. And he's cultivating what he calls strategic detachment. His job in, the HR department is to manage the conversations that are had as a person is being fired. So his job is to demonstrate concern for the person being let go and trying to make that experience as easy as possible. And of course, the reason they have him in that position is so they can keep from getting sued from doing it the wrong way, which is, it's very interesting to just see that that's how corporate America works. And, to be helpful to someone who doesn't want to end up a complete cynic from the experience.
Well, it reminds me of just having such a deep sense of compassion, which is a reminder for myself that I have to be on board with myself in that deep sense of compassion.
Yes, if we don't have that compassion for ourselves,
We don't
it's
know it.
impossible to have it for
Hmm.
other
Yeah,
people,
especially now.
especially now,
Yeah.
because it's so obviously lacking in,
Mm,
the powers that be.
sure is.
And the clear lack of respect for and value for human life, period. And of course, any value for competence went out the window. But I feel an amazing sense of respect and value for everyone fighting back and uh, the community spirit that we're seeing, in people with whistles and mobilizing all their resources, community resources to protect their neighbors. And the numbers of people doing that are increasing. How may we serve this morning?
I was just going to say that it seems like the point is chaos for them, for the forces that are perpetrating all of these atrocities. Is the main point is chaos, just creating as much chaos as possible. So, yeah,
Well, the real point at the moment is distraction from the Epstein's files, which will end the whole thing. They will. And everybody in power knows that. And so the name of the game is distraction. And the way to create the most distraction is to just control the media by endless distraction. But there's so many people that understand that that's what's happening, that the days are numbered.
I hope so.
Well, one of the very good pieces of news is that ICE is headless. It's not a concerted, trained force of people who know what they're doing. They are totally chaotic. And so they're very inefficient. And because of that, they're unpredictable, but they're also completely unwieldy. So they're not a force that's capable of being organized into something that has a purpose. And so that their very chaos makes them inefficient. So it'll be quite interesting to, see how long it takes to get the Epstein files out. Because they're having to become bolder and bolder in their opposition to their release, clearer and clearer that that's the name of the game. And have you seen the monks, the Buddhist monks that are walking across the country promoting peace? Mm-hmm. And their van broke down, and there was a small business owner who bought them a completely outfitted new van so that they could continue on their journey. Yes. And they're just meeting crowds and crowds of people who walk with him. Yes, it feels so good. And they only do that in times of crisis. Most of the time, they would just be praying in the monastery. And it seems to me our job as we're aging and less capable of, energetic participation beyond our field, that maintaining that field as a high quality environment is a full-time job. And that's, how we're really preparing ourselves for the next transition in our lives. By not allowing anything but love to dominate us and our field. This doesn't mean we live in a world of denial.
Hello.
Yes. I can't hear you.
There were two big ideas that came this week that I'm exploring to find the truth and the relevancy. One was that one that I've heard before, which is the idea that a wave of the hand shifts all the molecules in the universe, which brings you to the important responsibility that we have to keep our attitude correct and loving. The other idea was something that Wells read and shared with a few people about, well, it was a story, and the person who has passed is asking, well, is finding out that they're coming back as a Chinese girl in ancient days, 500 BC or something. And he said, how could that be? And the answer was, well, first of all, time is an illusion. And so there is no before and after in a way. And that, in fact, each of us has been or is going to be everyone. Um, hmm. Anyway, it was a really huge idea, I guess, but it hit more than just mental. And the truth of it rang a bell inside. Both of those ideas are kind of, I'm taking as instructions as to how to respond to the world situation, to my own little world situations. Anyway, I just wanted to share that because it's something that is just beginning in a way to uh, for my understanding of it, for my actual the word we used to use was grokking of it. Um, it's immense. Both of those ideas were immense. I don't know if that's appropriate for today, but it 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 has been occurring to me, and it does shift my attitude about the world situation and my part in it. Anyway, thank you for listening, and that was that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. You know, what we see in the value of it is it opens the mind, the narrow perspective that things happen evolutionarily in only one direction.
Hang on just 1 minute, and I'm going to make you louder.
Oh, okay. So what we were saying, I don't know if you heard it, but the idea that evolution only happens in one direction or in one plane or in one way, of course, can't be right. And that time only goes in one direction because it does in our particular time, place, and form. Doesn't mean that time itself is limited in any way. It's our rational mind that has boxed time into a singular direction, and it's our belief in that singular direction that we share that keeps it operating in that way. But I bet you've had the experience of going through an internal change and actually moving from one timeline to another, even if you didn't articulate it to yourself in that way at that time. I think we all have experiences where that happens, where we make a dimensional shift in our understanding because we have moved from one timeline to another that has created a completely different life for us. You know, an example of that would be, not always, but it could be an experience of moving into a spiritual community, you know, suddenly changing your environment from one dimension to a completely different focus. But, you know, that's a very externalized demonstration of that. Most of the really, you know, profound things that happen are us choosing a different reality in a moment where we say, enough, I'm doing this differently. And then suddenly we've made a dimensional shift. We've all done that. Or we wouldn't be on this conversation. And you would not have had the experiences you're talking about this week without the willingness to have a broader perspective. We can't entertain a different reality if we deny the possibility of its existence. And this happens all around us all the time. I'll give you a very concrete example. People that won't entertain the idea of Chinese medicine. That is a complete, absence of openness to, and so it's very simple, these ways that we limit our experience that we don't even know we're doing by our narrow-mindedness. And so being able to entertain that time goes backwards and forwards is quite wonderful.
A phrase that comes to mind, it's from the I Ching, and it says you're not required to believe anything, just have a willing suspension of disbelief. And things can come in that way. They can come in that door.
Exactly. Yes. When we get in trouble is that we demand things to be a certain way. And that can happen either from fatigue. And for most of us, we get narrow because we're distracted into something else. I had an interesting experience this week. I was looking at a child's chart. She was born in April. And I was looking at it, and I realized that the ascendant was at 29 degrees and 15 minutes. And a sign is 30 degrees. And I thought, I wonder how many minutes this birth time is from being in the next sign. Because if the ascendant moves to the next sign, the whole chart changes into something very different. So I used my software to move it 4 minutes ahead. And that's how much it took to get it into the next sign. So then I thought about my experience in, babies being born in the hospital, and how that experience is always so dramatic that you can't possibly be thinking about time in that moment. You're thinking about everything else. Making sure the baby's caught safely, making sure the baby gets to the bassinet and washed off and breathing, and, all of the things that are required to sustain life before you would even consider looking at the clock. Anybody in the room, you're captivated by the entire experience of the appearance of this new individual. And then I thought about karmic responsibility in reinterpreting a birth time. And if you choose a different destiny for a child on paper, have you done something karmically unforgivable? And, if you choose a different destiny that creates different expectations around the child, does that make a better or worse life? And how do you value, with the child being born in one sign, they're a very internal person, and there's not much expectation for them to manifest in the external world. If they're born 4 minutes later, everything moves to the external world. And the internal world is well, the life is different. And so choosing, who has the right to choose one of those for another person? And, is that even a sane investigation to pursue? So I've been in this moral quandary about it. And in a way, really delighted that I have teachers with, decades of experience who are willing to have this conversation with me, because it's a really important one to, make some decisions about. And so when I saw this, I just started this whole thought process about who has the right to do what. And, the more I know, the more I have the potential to create whatever. And that is, and then that becomes a responsibility. And I probably spoke about this earlier. There's some people who teach astrology who say that if you tell a person what to do, you become responsible for their karma. And so that also has, I've been doing some deep introspection about that, especially as a channel. So these are really interesting philosophical questions. And they're not just philosophical. I mean, it's actually, but it was very interesting. I'm going to tell you this too. When I was looking at the chart, I just didn't feel right about the chart. It was like I couldn't breathe in a certain way. And I kept looking at the numbers and feeling like, the baby had waited to get into these particular nakshatras because it had just gone over the edge. And then I thought, maybe if the baby had waited 4 more minutes to get into that next sign, that's what was supposed to happen, and it just got recorded differently. Because as soon as I moved the chart, I could breathe differently. So I don't know what that means really, but it was a very clear experience for me internally, that I was uncomfortable until I, tried this other chart on for size. So I don't, there's a whole practice in astrology called nimitta, where you pay attention to these things in your environment, both in your body and in the external environment. Nimittas are omens. And so, if you can't breathe and suddenly you make a discovery about something and you can breathe, then maybe that has value. So it's a very tricky conversation. And one that I'm happy to have with my instructors because they must have been thinking about this for decades and have some pretty clear ideas about it. You know, I think it's possible to make a rule that if you change a birth time beyond 2 minutes, that's not kosher. You know, that sort of feels, but you know, time in an operating room, which is where people are born, time is suspended there. It's not about time. It's about, you know, life and death. And time becomes suspended in the intensity of those circumstances. So it's very, very hard. So I welcome any ideas you know, any feelings that come up for you about this.
Nancy, were you going to say something? Oh, I was just going to say that, well, I was going to ask about the connection between the map and learning how to read the map and your own ability to tune into what's, you know, the reality of it. It's almost like it goes from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions or 5 dimensions or whatever. But I also wanted to say my daughter, I went into labor 2 weeks before she was born. And to the extent that took myself to the hospital, and I was over halfway dilated when the labor just stopped. And so I stayed in the hospital for a while, and finally they said, go home, keep your bags packed. And she wasn't born for another 2 weeks. So, and it moved her from, in this
Yeah,
case, a
it moved
Leo,
her completely different.
completely different.
And so there is this idea that babies, you know when it's time to be born. And, you know, was it right what I was tuning into? Oh, she waited for this and this and this and meant to wait for that, but couldn't, you know, or what, you know, there was some intervention in the choice of the time that they wrote down. Uh, so it's just it's a complete mystery to me, and it's just so interesting to try to record objectively the circumstances of how I even came to think of that. So that's very interesting to me. And is it a travesty to change a destiny because it feels better to me in terms of my being able to breathe freely? And then there's the other thing, well, what's the value of learning about omens and then not paying attention to them when they happen? Because the numbers don't agree. I mean, I can argue either side very effectively.
Have you pulled out your pendulum?
No, I have not.
I mean, maybe that's not the thing to do, but it is curious. I mean,
No, I would get the same answer
yeah,
because in me, there's this
yeah,
other chart that feels so much more like the
yeah,
life that this person
is
would
right.
choose.
Yeah,
That's what it feels like to
yeah.
me. But is it me choosing that life for this person? Or is it them, you know, pushing me
It's very
to?
curious. It really is.
It is really curious. And
Yeah,
so,
I think
and
it's good that
it's
it
part of
comes
why
up.
I'm bringing it, because it's, you know, if you're going to learn to read the map, then it means that you understand how the map is created in a certain way, and you know where the decision points are that can make a huge difference. And so I think it's important at some point to say, well, beyond this number of degrees, you know, I'm not going to entertain a change. Because I can tell you that for me, one of my teachers suggested that I was born a minute later than my chart because it changed one of the divisional charts, and it made way more sense. It put Jupiter in the chart that has to do with career. It put Jupiter in the first house because, you know, I've had so many careers. There's something driving that. And having Jupiter in the second house is not nearly as effective in driving careers, having it in the first house. And being born 1 minute later made that happen. But it was describing a life that's already mostly done. So that's a learning experience, because you can see if that 1 minute had been added sooner, you know, astrologers reading my chart might have said different things. But, you know, the astrologer who read my chart the first time was Chakrapani, who I mean, I didn't even know how to understand what he told me. He told me that my life started very, very late, and that after that it would be wonderful. That wasn't all he said, but that was what really stuck. And he was, I'm sure, speaking from an internal perspective, but also external. I mean, it is true that I'm living the most wonderful life at this time that I ever, you know, beyond my wildest imagination. I could not have imagined the life that I'm living, either internally or externally, because it's so far removed from where I started in both fields. And I suspect that's probably true of everybody on this call. And yeah, and for each of us, it's because we at some point decided that something else was more important than what we were given, and that we had to explore that. And then, so there's a part of me that says, with this with this person, there's no harm in giving them what looks like a much easier internal life. Because if it's going to be difficult, they'll for sure experience it. But if it's not, then, it's just hard to know. And you don't even know at what age it would be, possible to know the truth. But, what the person was born with is, difficulty everywhere. Or, if you just move it 4 minutes later, everything becomes much easier in the life. And then the question is, who gets to make that decision? It's that kind of thing that would make me walk away from astrology altogether. Say, I don't want that responsibility. So it's just so fascinating to me that has come up. Yes.
I have a question about that. I see you as a conduit. Well, from the very beginning,
Mm-hmm.
Annassa is you. And I think it's in the personality that says, am I responsible? Or, and that's a good thing. I think questioning whether or not I'm interfering is always a good thing. And acknowledging that you are a conduit for the higher intelligence. And trusting that. That's what came to me when you were speaking. It seems rather clear, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, I can go with that. And really where I've been coming down in myself is that choosing what feels like the highest best for the child is the right decision. And so choosing what appears to be a much more beneficial life, even though it pushes the birth time 4 minutes, there's a reason I was pushed to even look at that. And it was because I couldn't breathe. And if I couldn't breathe, is that not the representation of the spirit of the person coming through me in that moment? Because I make myself available to what wants to be seen. And yes, I become responsible for choosing the highest best that I can see. And if I'm wrong, I will learn. And I think that's a very valid way to think through it. So I will report back to you because I'm taking it to one of my teachers later this week. Who, and he's got a PhD in Jungian therapy, so he's very, very astute to these questions. He enjoys them. They're part of why he's an astrologer and why he's a therapist, both. Although interestingly, he doesn't identify as either one, which is which is if he's with astrologers, he says he's a therapist, and I imagine if he's with therapists, he says he's an astrologer.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we are at the meditation point for us to have a deep experience again before we adjourn, which I think is definitely on the menu for today, to be in contact with our deepest. And for some reason, it feels so right to me to meditate as though we are headless at this particular time, because we can stop thinking. And that may be my own rational mind is just completely exhausted. Love being with you guys. Always, always, always. Let's meditate. So beautiful to be with you all today. Mm. What a gift. Thank you so much for coming. Really beautiful to be here. Bye for now.